Hi, everybody. So, by this time, hopefully, you are ready to start planning your literary analysis essay. So, we're going to go over some things that you should be doing as you start planning the essay, and hopefully, it'll make it a little bit easier for you. So, the first thing we want to do when we're planning any essay, including this one, is to choose and annotate a prompt. So for this essay, you have a few options that you can choose from in terms of which which option on the prompt you will answer in your essay. So the first thing you want to do is choose which one you're going to go with. And then from there, you want to annotate it so you can identify what exactly your purpose is and what needs to be done. So for example, let's say that I've chosen this one here. So this option asks me to analyze the ways in which gender roles and medical views of women in the 1800s contributed to Edna's options in life and therefore her unhappiness. So if I annotate this and kind of highlight the different portions where I can see those important keywords, I can see that first of all, I'm going to analyze, which means I need to look closely at these things. And what am I looking at? I'm looking at gender roles and also medical views of women. So I'm going to look at both of those things and discuss how they contributed to her options in life and how that made her unhappy. So now that I have a clear purpose and a clear idea of what exactly I want to prove or discuss in my essay, then the next step is to write a working thesis. Remember that your thesis statement needs to answer the question or questions that are posed by the prompt. Think of it as kind of a roadmap for your essay. And remember that all of your body paragraphs will work towards supporting the thesis. Your thesis statement should be one sentence long and it should be in your intro. Remember to try and make it pretty specific and not very vague. So we've got some example thesis statements here. The first one is about gender roles. So gender roles and medical views in the 1800s left Edna no options except being a wife and a mother, so they ultimately led to her unhappiness. So notice how in the thesis statement I mentioned the things that I am going to be discussing in the essay, right? Gender roles and medical views. And then how did they make her unhappy? Because they left her no options except being a wife and a mother. Okay, so make sure that for whichever thesis statement you decide to go with, based on which prompt you're answering, you make sure that you are always sort of circling back to and helping your readers clearly understand which prompt you're discussing and what the overall goals are of the essay, right? And then you've got some additional examples here, and it's all about the same prompt, right? These are all different ways of saying that medical views and gender roles contributed to Edna's unhappiness. So the second one, medical views and gender roles were very rigid in the 1800s, leaving no room for Edna to be her true self and be happy. The third one, Victorian beliefs about women led to everyone expecting Edna to be a doting wife and mother, but she wasn't happy in those roles. So notice that all of these specifically say that she was unhappy. And why was she unhappy? Because of medical and social beliefs at the time. So that clarifies for my readers what the purpose of my essay is, and this all happens in one sentence in my intro. So once you have a working thesis, and remember that your thesis statement can be changing as you change your ideas and as you get to writing the actual essay. So we call it a working thesis because it's not that your thesis statement is going to stay exactly as it is. It's kind of a rough draft of your thesis. So we just want to get something down so that we have something to refer back to while we're planning and writing the rest of the essay. So the next step is to get all of these ideas together that we have about how you can support that thesis statement that you just wrote. So you want to start with main points and then work towards topic sentences later. Brainstorming takes lots of different forms, so use whichever one works for you. Some common types of brainstorming that I find students use a lot are listing, bubble charts or bubble maps, tables, free writing, and anything else that works for you. So however you like to brainstorm. Okay, so let's say, sorry, at the time that I'm recording these lectures, our air is like horribly smoky. So I keep losing my voice, so I apologize. All right, so let's say that I'm brainstorming for this topic that I chose, which is that gender roles and medical views are contributing to Edna's unhappiness. So the way that I brainstorm is with these like bubble charts that you probably learned about in, third or fourth grade and then maybe used forever like me. So that's just what works for me. But again, you can use whichever thing works for you. But with this way of brainstorming, my main idea is going here, right? And so my main idea is that Edna's unhappiness was caused by two basic things, medical views and then gender roles. So I'm going to have kind of two sections in my paper. I want to make sure that I'm devoting probably about half of it to medical views that made her unhappy, and then maybe another half to gender roles and how those made her unhappy. So from these kind of main topics, then I'm going to have a lot of different subtopics, and each one of these will turn into its own paragraph. So when we think about medical views that were happening at the time, one of those was that unhappy women were mentally ill, and this is where we would discuss that whole concept of being like hysterical, right? So because Edna was unhappy, she was labeled as mentally ill, or she might have been, and that would make somebody unhappy, right? Being labeled as mentally ill just for not, wanting to be a wife and a mother. Another medical view that existed at the time was that women were weak and needed protection from men. So we can talk about that because Edna, finds herself wanting to be independent and kind of strike out and have her own life. But that wouldn't have been acceptable at the time. So she just didn't really have that option. And because of that, that would have contributed to her unhappiness. So I might have, a paragraph about this, a paragraph about this, and then I could continue on and, make more little branches here with additional medical views that contributed to her unhappiness. And this is where maybe some of my outside research about that topic would help me to know about those medical views and be able to discuss them and how they contributed to her unhappiness. The other section of this prompt was about gender roles, right? So I need to explain how gender roles were problematic for Edna and contributed to her being unhappy. So we have all of these different expectations, and what I did for my brainstorming is I listed several. So some of those include that women have to be happy as mothers. That's one of those. Women have to be happy as wives. They have to obey their husbands, and they have to dote on their children. So again, I would have, maybe a paragraph about each one of these as I start, getting into the actual writing of my essay. And again, you could continue, making additional little bubbles here for each of the paragraphs that you would like to have. So it's important to have some sort of a system that you use for brainstorming. Again, it's important to remember that main ideas are different than topic sentences. So earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that you want to start with main ideas and then move towards topic sentences, because the topic sentences, that's the first sentence in each paragraph, and that's what you can actually use to write your draft. So main ideas are important, but we need to get from main idea over to topic sentence. So keep that in mind as you're planning. Main ideas are your main points, and those support the thesis, but they need to be developed a little bit more. So remember that your topic sentences need to have a subject, a verb, and express a complete thought. So I've got some examples here. Women as wives and mothers is, the main idea. And then if I kind of develop that further, I can turn it into a topic sentence that has a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete thought. So I'd go from this to this full sentence. according to gender roles at the time, women had to be wives and mothers. So this could set me up for a paragraph where I would discuss those gender roles and those expectations, and then discuss how that was problematic for Edna because she didn't want to be only a wife and a mother, and then she was unhappy about what to do with that because she wasn't allowed to be anything else according to society, right? Another example, unhappy women were mentally ill. So that's the main idea, and then I can turn that into a topic sentence. Medical beliefs at the time held that women who were unhappy in their assigned roles suffered from mental illness. So again, this would set me up for a whole paragraph where I can discuss how medical beliefs at the time would have labeled people like Edna as mentally ill rather than just, challenging gender roles and exploring themselves and whatnot. So once you're ready to write your topic sentences, make sure that you're writing one for each of your main ideas. Arrange them in an order that makes sense to you and will make sense to your reader. So you want to take us through all of the different steps in your argument. Remember that your goal is to support your thesis and persuade the reader to see that your interpretation is valid. So think of this as kind of like a court case. You're presenting all of this evidence to show us that your interpretation of the text is valid. When you're writing those topic sentences, make sure that you have all of these things here. You need to have a subject, and that's the person or thing that is doing something in the sentence. You need to have a verb, that's the action that's happening in the sentence. And then make sure that you're expressing a complete thought, and make sure that you're making arguable claims in each of your topic sentences. So we've got some example topic sentences here. Medical views such as the concept that unhappy women were mentally ill contributed to Edna's unhappiness. So if we look at each of these, we can see that there's always a subject. For instance, here, medical views is the subject because this is the thing that is doing the action, right? And the action is contributing to her unhappiness. So medical views helped to make Edna unhappy. And it also expresses a complete thought because I'm saying that medical views, such as unhappy women being mentally ill, are one of the things that made her unhappy. And it's also an arguable claim because this isn't just something that is a fact. It's something that people could argue with, right? You could argue that it wasn't medical views that caused her to be unhappy. So because you can sort of see it from either way, that makes an arguable claim, and that's good because we want to be able to prove this thing, right? Some additional example topic sentences. Dr. Mandalay contributes to Edna's unhappiness by judging her health without even talking to her. Gender roles forced Edna to marry a man she didn't love, which made her unhappy. Gender roles also forced Edna to have children before she was ready, which made her unhappy. And Leonce's behavior as an ideal husband is right according to society, but isn't enough for Edna and makes her unhappy. So all of these topic sentences would be about topics I would be discussing, one paragraph about each of these, right? And I would need to include evidence from the text to help discuss and show that this is happening. And then I would need my own discussion about that evidence to help my reader see where I'm coming from and why this makes sense. So once you've got your topic sentences ready to go, and remember that those topic sentences can change, right? We're just doing sort of planning and drafting here, so they don't have to be perfect and always stay the same. But once you have those topic sentences, then it's time to choose evidence. Primarily, we're using evidence from the novel. You are going to use some evidence, at least one quote, from an outside source. And that can be anything from talking about gender roles or medical views, for example, or you can talk about any of the other things depending on what your chosen topic is for this particular essay. But since for the purpose of this lecture, we're talking about medical and gender roles, then that's what my outside source would be about, right? You can get the outside sources on your own using the databases, or you can use ones that we've read for class. So you want to make sure that whichever source you're using, you make sure that your evidence supports the claim you make in the topic sentence. Keep your quotes short. Remember that at no point do you need to summarize what happened in the story. Assume that your reader knows what has happened in the story and has read the book, and you don't need to tell us just what happened. Instead, you need to use your evidence to show us why your topic sentence is valid and correct. And remember that we're analyzing, right? We are not summarizing. Remember to use the quote sandwich method. And generally, it's a good rule of thumb to say more than you think you need to when explaining the quote's significance and how it supports your claim or topic sentence. Remember that just giving me a quote is not doing anything in terms of analysis. It's just showing me a quote, and then anyone who reads that quote can interpret it in very different ways. So it's your job in that explanation portion following your quote to really back that quote up and explain how and why it supports the topic sentence. So that's a very important part. This is really the analysis portion of the essay. So when you're choosing quotes from the novel, I would recommend going back through your annotations and your notes from when you were reading, and then choose quotes that support the claims you'd like to make in your essay. So for example, let's say that this was my claim/topic sentence. Dr. Mandalay contributes to Edna's unhappiness by judging her health without even talking to her. Then I might have my signal phrase and my evidence together, because if I'm writing something, this is how I gather my evidence. That way I can just sort of put it all together very easily. And I have my signal phrase and my citation already there. So this is the topic sentence. Here's my signal phrase and evidence. In chapter 22 of The Awakening, Dr. Mandalay tells Leonce, most women are moody and whimsical. This is some passing whim of your wife. And then I have the citation with the last name and the page number there. So now I'm ready to write this paragraph. So the idea here is that you've got your main ideas, you've written your topic sentences, and then you're ready to go look through your notes and choose all of this evidence. That way, when the time comes to write the essay and write the draft, all you have to do is explain how this quote supports this topic sentence, and that is creating your paragraph, right? You've got your topic sentence, the quote, the citation, all ready to go, and all you have to do is add your explanation. When you're choosing quotes from your outside source, remember that it can be one of the ones that we read for class, or if you need to or would like to, you're welcome to find one on your own. Use at least one quote from your outside source in your essay, and make sure that you're still using that quote sandwich method of introducing, citing, and explaining it, just as you would do when you're citing evidence from the novel. And then here's an example of using a quote from an outside source. So let's say that my claim was about gender roles at the time. So gender roles at the time meant that the only people with power in Edna's life were men, which meant she had no say in her own happiness. So then I've chosen a quote from one of the handouts that we read for class. According to the handout, Louisiana Creole Cultures and Traditions, marriages were essentially arranged between fathers in Creole culture. And then I have the citation. Since this doesn't have an author, I'm going to use the first word in the title and then the page number. So that's how you cite without an author. So now I'm ready to go on and discuss how Edna's marriage was basically an accident, according to her, right? And that was pretty common in cultures at the time that she was kind of a part of. And then I would explain how, because she wasn't really in charge of who she could be with and whatnot, she didn't marry for love, and so that contributed to her unhappiness. So whether you're using the outside source or the novel, it's the same sort of way of getting, those examples and those quotes, right? I still recommend that you go ahead and have your claim and your topic sentence here ready to go before you choose your evidence, because that way you can make sure that they really go together And then when you do choose your evidence, it's a good idea to just go ahead and write that signal phrase and then also the MLA citation. That way you're ready to go, and all you have to do is add your explanatory sentences and you've got your paragraph done. So a reminder about quote sandwiches. First, you want to make an arguable claim that supports your thesis in your topic sentence. Then introduce the evidence that you're using. Make sure that you use a signal phrase, and that's a noun plus a verb, such as the author states, or the handout says, or, Leonce tells Edna, okay? Then you've got the quote or the paraphrase. Make sure to cite an MLA. That's the author's last name plus the page number. And then explain the significance. So this is the important part, right? How does the evidence support this claim that you made in the topic sentence? And if possible, it's nice if you can also transition to the next paragraph. So here's an example of a quote sandwich that's being done really well. We've got the topic sentence here. Edna's unhappiness is partially caused by Dr. Mandalay, since he makes judgments about her health without even speaking to her about her symptoms. So I've got that claim that clearly tells my readers what this is going to be about, and it's arguable. Now we're moving into evidence. In chapter 22 of The Awakening, the doctor tells Leonce most women are moody and whimsical. This is some passing whim of your wife. And then we have the MLA citation, last name, page number, period. Then we have all of this here, which is the explanation part. So remember that this is where you're analyzing, and this is the most important part. So it's your job here to show us how this quote supports this claim. If Leonce or the doctor had bothered to speak with Edna about her feelings and recent struggles, either of them might have been able to help her through her difficult times. However, medical views at the time valued men's opinions and didn't even consider asking women how they felt or why they were unhappy. Since she wasn't even considered in her own medical care, these medical views are partially to blame for Edna's unhappiness. Okay, so recap, preparing for the essay. Number 1, make sure you choose a prompt that you would like to respond to and annotate that prompt so you know exactly what it's asking you to do. Then write a thesis that answers the prompt. Brainstorm ideas that support your thesis statement. Write those topic sentences which expand on and sort of turn those main ideas into complete sentences that are arguable claims. Then choose evidence that supports each topic sentence. And finally, use the quote sandwich method to write all of your body paragraphs. As always, if you have any questions, you can talk to me, ask for a meeting on Remind or anything, or via email. You can also talk in your groups and get help from people in your group who are working on the essay as well. And then definitely tutoring is a great option, especially when you're writing an essay. Remember that you do get extra credit for working in your groups or for going to tutoring, so those are great options for you as well.